4.
It's Masters Week and golf is on everyone's mind. Augusta National in Georgia beckons thousands to witness the vibrant azaleas and savor the abundant pimento cheese sandwiches. Weather has always been a major player in the game, but did you know climate change is on the scorecard now too? This week we are going off the radar and hitting the links. We'll tee off by talking to a golf course architect about how climate change has impacted courses around the world.
70% of our top 100 golf courses in the world are all at sea level and at some risk of being lost or damaged by these rising sea levels.
Then we'll get an inside scoop from the PGA Tour meteorologist on what it's like forecasting the weather at Augusta National for the Masters. I'll also chat with golf pro Andrew Rice about his simple formulas to help adjust your drives and approaches based on wind, temperature, and other meteorological factors.
250-yard driver on a humid day will go 1.2 yards further.
So hop in the cart and join me on this very special 50th episode of Off the Radar. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie, and you're listening to Off the Radar, a production of the National Weather Desk. On the show, we dig deep into topics about weather, climate, the ocean, space, and much more. Our goal is to help you better understand the weather and to love it as much as we do. Welcome to Off the Radar. Today is a very exciting day for the show and for me because I have someone on the show that means a lot to me, my husband. So today's show is all about golf. So of course I had to bring on someone who has been incredibly influential in the golf community, Troy Miller. Welcome to Off the Radar. How does it feel to be on the show with your wife?
Wow, thank you so much. And congratulations. This is episode number
50.
Halfway to 100. Congratulations. That's awesome.
It also means that it's been on the air for about a year because it was this time last year when I started up this podcast. The folks at Sinclair came to me and said, hey, we want to do a podcast. And I said, I'll do it. So it's been an awesome year. It's been really exciting. And I thought at some point I was going to run out of ideas, but it seems to be the opposite because every week I just get more and more ideas. And then I hear from people that have ideas too. And this is an episode I've wanted to do for a while, but it really lines up this week because there is a big golf event coming up, the Masters, which I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So I want you to give a little brief background on yourself and what you do in the golf industry.
Sure. So I, kind of a lifelong member of the golf industry, grew up in the golf industry. My father is a golf professional, has been a PGA professional for over 40 years, grew up around the game, and out of college, went on to get my master's in golf course architecture and started as a golf course architect in my career. I've worked on 3 different continents with Landmark Land Company and now with Southworth Development, developing golf course communities. As well as golf courses on my own under Miller Golf Design. Most notably, in recent years, Charleston Municipal was renovated in 2020 and has received a lot of acclaim for a lot of the work that was done there. But started working in golf as a 9 or 10-year-old kid, had the great pleasure of working for some of the best architects in the business, Pete Dye, Tom Fazio, Jack Nicklaus, and inevitably then as in-house golf course architect for Landmark Land Company, and now as chief development officer for Southworth.
Let's talk about the Muni, the Charleston Municipal course that you renovated. What was going on with this course that it needed renovation?
Sure. So Charleston Muni was built in the 1920s during the golden age of golf course architecture. And it had a lot of issues. We have a lot of issues when it relates to flooding and rising sea levels. And over the course of the last 20 years in particular, we've seen inundation of the back nine of the golf course during normal high tides, forget king tides. And so what we were dealing with was a golf course that we were on the cusp of losing many of the holes along the Stono River, as well as the extremity of the weather events that we were seeing in town with these high rainfall totals on these severe thunderstorms, creating flooding situations, not only on the golf course, but in the surrounding community. And so that was one of the big pillars of the redesign that we worked on, was trying to make sure that we were making the golf course sustainable for the next 100 years and for generations to come, as well as helping some of the flooding in the surrounding areas and creating an opportunity to move water. You can't get rid of it, but you can move it into the places that you want to move it. And that was a big part of what we did.
So how did you do that?
The biggest piece of this really had to do with creating some elevation along the river. There were places where we elevated the golf holes as much as 5 to 7 feet in order to protect against these rising sea levels. I can remember a conversation in particular with you that we were early on in the process having the conversation about what we were going to do and how we were going to elevate these holes. And I think I said something like 3 to 4 feet. And just in passing, I remember you saying, you mean 5 to 6. And I said, okay, I get it. And you're right. And thinking with that 100-year view was a big part of what continued to be in the back of my mind throughout the process. And so with this, the other thing we were able to do was generate some more basins, basically moving water and creating some new ponds that are in out of play areas to take on more of that water, particularly as it related to stormwater.
Okay, so this is at least a couple of years ago, if not a few years ago. We've had several kind of big rain events, even hurricanes here in Charleston. So how has the golf course fared in these events?
There have been a few days where I have walked out to the golf course and literally watched the tide come in and watched it come up to the edge of some of these features and then recede back out. And most importantly, again, you're never going to get rid of the water. It's about trying to move it to the locations and using a lot of the same techniques that you hear about in the Dutch dialogues and trying to live with water was a big part of what we did. And so when we do get these big storms, what happens is the water does infiltrate into the golf course, but it goes into the places to where it can recover quickly. It acts as a basin for the surrounding community, and then it is able to get out as the tide recedes and as the storms cease. And so it's been very successful. We've never had a situation where any of the golf features have been inundated with water. The tees, the greens have all stayed out of any of our storms. And we've had some pretty significant storms. I believe the largest non-storm high tide in history happened since 2020 when the golf course reopened. And we've had some significant severe and tropical weather scenarios that have led to, events where we had 7 to 8 inches of rain over 24 hours, coupled with 7-foot tides.
So this is one golf course. Have you seen other golf course architects renovating golf courses for the same reason? Is this a problem around the country?
Yeah, not only around the country, but around the world. There's a lot of talk right now. And in fact, I believe it was either Bloomberg or Forbes put out an article earlier this week about how the best links courses in Scotland and Ireland are sinking. And I believe roughly 70% of our top 100 golf courses in the world are all at sea level and at some risk of being lost or damaged or parts damaged by these rising sea levels. And so it is definitely something that is on the radar of golf course architects, golf course owners alike. And even I think one of the ones that's probably easiest for folks to see is Pebble Beach. Every year in February, you're watching the Pebble Beach Pro-Am and you're seeing 18 and the waves crashing off of the Pacific there. And you see the big seawall that's been built. That was an effort that went on in order to try to protect the 18th hole from these more and more severe storms that they've experienced on Monterey Peninsula.
Let's talk a little bit about weather in golf too. We kind of talked about climate change in golf, and I want to talk about weather in golf. And the other guests I have on the show today, obviously you're going to be watching the Masters this week and this weekend. It seems to me, and maybe I'm just kind of like a layman looking at this, that every year there is a weather delay at the Masters. There's like a thunderstorm delay. Is this something you remember from like your childhood, or is this more recent?
Well, this sounds more like a climate change question because I think that there is a difference today. It seems to me, yes, I think that we have seen, that first full week in April has always historically been Masters Week. It's when all the azaleas are blooming and it's the most green place you'll ever see. And so it's always been that way. But now it does seem that temperatures are generally a little warmer. We're seeing some more severe weather and maybe a little bit more heating. There's been more days in the 80s than there have been in the 50s. As much as the folks at Augusta National are phenomenal at creating an incredible playing surface and do everything in their power to make sure that the tournament condition is impeccable and the best all year, they can't control the weather. And so when you get these big storms, you do get softer conditions that don't necessarily line up with what would be ideal in the eyes of the golfers and in the eyes of the tournament committee, of kind of fast and firm conditions that are lost when you get these big thunderstorms.
You talk about, you can't control things, but you can predict them to a certain point. So, one of the guests that I'm talking to today is Stuart Williams. So he has his own company that privately forecasts for events, and he forecasts for the Masters every year. He is a PGA forecaster. So they hire him to come out on site and forecast. And, it's got to be kind of a high pressure job. But I talked to him, and this interview is from last year because he cannot speak to the media at all leading up to the Masters. This is just another example of Augusta National and their, control and privacy. But he has, he's under contract and he can't speak to the media at all leading up to it. So we spoke to him after the Masters last year in hopes that we could run it this year and give people a little insight into what it's like to forecast for the Masters and other golf events. And it's really interesting. And he kind of hinted at like lightning is really the big thing. I know for you as a golfer, you're talking about winds and the play, but like for him, it's about safety and the patrons who are out there. So it's all about lightning.
I will say too, though, that forecast comes in handy a lot for your golf course superintendents and for your tournament committee on a setup perspective, so that they know when to start dialing back the irrigation or when to turn on some of the systems that allow for sucking some of the water out of the ground, or heating and cooling systems. There's a lot of technology out there that tries desperately to control the weather and control the conditions in golf.
And of course, the players themselves have a personal interest in the weather too. And he did say that, the players will sometimes come up to him and chat with him about weather. And speaking of players, the other guest I have on today is Andrew Rice, who I know he's a golf professional, a teacher. So he has formulas that golfers can use based on weather conditions so that they know what club to use, how to swing, which is really fascinating. So he was very cool to talk to. And I kind of love that intersection of golf and weather because it kind of is, our marriage.
And this is why you have so many ideas and why 50 podcasts is going to turn into 500 really quick. It affects everything and every element of business, particularly those that have intersection with the outdoors. And for golf, the billion-dollar industry that it is, it is about equipment and maintenance and tournaments. And there's all three of those who've got really important ties to weather.
What's your favorite golf course?
Oh, man, that's a big question that you've never asked me.
Yeah, I normally just ask you to do the dishes. That's why.
Donald Ross grew up in Dornoch, Scotland, that you and I visited a few years back and got to see his childhood home and the golf course he grew up on, Royal Dornoch. And that, to me, is still probably my favorite in the world because it was so influential in so much of what has happened in the United States.
Troy, is there anything else you want to add about the upcoming Masters or golf and weather or golf and climate change?
It's incredibly important what you do and what meteorologists in general do, because you guys have more influence on the golf industry than most. When people get up in the morning and golfers are looking, they want to know. They want to know whether or not they should make that tee time. They want to know what the golf course is going to be like. The impact that you have on superintendents around the country is incredibly high as well. And so I think it's really important for the weather folks out there that are a big part of this audience, I hope, to understand what impacts and how the weather really affects what we do as golfers and in the golf industry. And being able to highlight those factors and understanding. I mean, around our house, there's conversations about dew point and extremity of storms and wind and, a lot of those things where I'm always looking to understand exactly what a forecast means. Thank
you for always asking me when I'm like super busy doing something else too, by the way. Like, what's the dew point right now? What about inside? What about outside? What's the dew point going to be in 2 hours? I don't know. I'm cooking dinner. Well, Troy, thank you so much for being on today. I know it's weird to be on a podcast with me, but I appreciate it. I've been wanting to have you on for a while. I know you were nervous about it, right?
Yeah, I am tremendously humbled to be a part of this. And I could just only say how proud I am of the last year of Off the Radar and how much joy it's brought you. Here's to 50 and hopefully 500 more. And I hope all those listeners continue to bring great ideas to bring different content and more things like this where there's interaction between different walks of life and weather, because that's what it's all about. This is human interest weather stories.
Now here's my conversation with PGA meteorologist Stuart Williams. So can you tell me a little bit about how your career as a meteorologist morphed into this forecasting for golf and other events?
Well, I kind of got lucky. My track was when I was in school, I went to UNC Asheville. That's where I got my degree. I did an internship. I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So I did an internship at the local TV station there. And the meteorologist there, who was great to me, he decided that let's try and do weather for golf tournaments. So there was a local tournament there, the Crosby Celebrity Tournament that was in town. And so they asked the TV station to provide weather. And they said, okay, we'll come do live shots. No, we want you guys to help us with the weather. So we were in a tent. The local TV station had its own Doppler. And so we had a TV screen in a tent. And we just kind of put a black magic marker circle on where we thought we were on the screen. And sure enough, they had storms that week. And that just kind of set off the bells and the alarm saying, hey, man, we can make this work. So when I got out of school, I graduated in 92. So in 93, we started doing this part-time. And then from there, it just kind of snowballed. We started with like 4 or 5 local tournaments, the GGO, the Vantage Championship. And then from there, more tournaments wanted us to come help them out. So it just kind of snowballed. And by that end of 1995, the PGA Tour gave us a contract to cover all their events. And so we've been going forward ever since then. So it's been an amazing journey. When you thought you might want to do TV when you started your career, and then I ended up doing this, and I've been doing this for 30 years now. So it's crazy.
Are you a golfer?
Yeah, I play a little bit. They say if you want to play golf, don't get in the golf business, which is kind of true because, as much travel as we do, when I get home, I'm on a golf course 2 or 3 weeks in a row. So when I get home, I really don't want to go to a golf course, but I do play on occasion.
Okay, so tell me about weather factors in golf. What are the most important factors that you're looking at when forecasting for a golf tournament?
Well, number one, obviously, it's the player and the spectator safety. So lightning and dangerous weather is our number one concern. So, I have 2 laptop computers we set up at the course. We also have a electric field meter that we set up. And so using, Doppler radar, lightning detection, and an electric field meter, I mean, we know exactly when it's going to be dangerous at the golf course. So using all that technology together, we can tell the officials, hey, this storm's 25 miles away. It's going to be here in an hour. So let's start getting prepared. And as it gets closer, then obviously the advice I give to the officials, hey, we now it's time to stop. And so that's when the horns will blow on the golf course. And that signals that it's a dangerous situation. And we start the evacuation process. So
lightning seems like a given, like that's dangerous. Everybody needs to go. Are there really tough calls you have to make when it comes to other types of weather?
Well, I mean, the toughest call for us is, okay, especially in the summertime, you have the pop-up thunderstorms and they're close by. And, if lightning is inside that 8 mile radius of the golf course, then obviously we're going to stop. But sometimes, in the summertime, that storm may be 7, 8 miles to the east of you and it's moving away. So then, you kind of have that gray area. Okay, it's not going to hit us and it's moving away. So we may fudge and say, okay, that's moving away. We're going to be fine. But other than that, it doesn't have to be dangerous weather to have an impact on the golf course. Early and late in the year, frost is an issue. And so you don't want to let the players out on the course and step on a frozen grass blade, and you'll do damage to the golf course. So fog plays a big role, especially after a lengthy rainy day. And the next day, it's just got that dampness in the ground. You wake up in the morning and it's clear, and all of a sudden all the fog forms. So fog delays us because it's hard to see down the fairway and hit that little white ball down the fairway and see where it's going to land. So, those are issues that we deal with all the time. And that's something that we have to think about as meteorologists for golf tournaments than most people wouldn't think about.
So you're forecasting for the tournament. Are you also forecasting for the players? Are they asking you for information about wind or temperature?
We put out a forecast a couple times a day. And there's a player page that forecast gets uploaded into so they can check the forecast on their phone. That forecast is put on the tee boxes. So when the guys tee off, the caddies and the players can see the forecast. And then obviously, obviously wind is a very big concern because the strength of the wind could be at the player's back when they tee off, or it could be in their face. It could be a crosswind, left or right, coming from either direction. So that wind is a very crucial thing that we forecast and that we are probably trying to be more accurate at than anything. And, wind also plays a role in how the course is going to set up as well. So where they pick that where the officials pick the hole location on the greens, if you have a lake to the right of the hole and you're thinking about going right, a right hole location, well, if the wind's blowing left or right, you might want to move that hole location to the other side of the green so the hole plays more fair. So those are all the things that, the officials really, wind plays a big role in the course setup. And then obviously course setup also, if we're going to have rain that day. So they may pick some hole locations on the green that are up on a mound instead of in a low spot because the low spot's going to puddle first.
What about ground moisture? Do you have to deal with agriculture at all?
Well, the tour has their own agronomist. So he's there working with the local superintendent and the grounds crew to,
of course they do.
make sure that the golf course is going to play to the PGA Tour's specifications, and they like it firm and fast, and they like to push the edge a little bit, and so there's certain conditions they want to meet. So we work with the agronomist too. So a lot of things they like to look at are, of course, evapotranspiration rates, which we call ET rates. Wind obviously plays a big role in what they're going to do to the golf course. Instead of double cutting the greens, they may only single cut, or they may not even cut the green at all if we know we're going to really have really high wind. So the ball doesn't blow off the green. So taller grass grips that ball a little bit better so it doesn't move on the green. So, yeah. So, I mean, we pretty much, weather has a touch or an influence on pretty much all of the golf tournament.
Do you ever get blamed or thanked by the players for what's going on?
Oh, I mean, you're a meteorologist, so I mean, we get blamed for everything. It's either too hot, too cold, too windy, too warm. It's always too something, right? So you're never going to make them all happy. But for the most part, obviously sunny days, everybody's happy in a good mood because everything's going smoothly. And then obviously if you throw a thunderstorm in there and you do have to stop play, then obviously we're the blame for that. But all in all, I think, on the PGA Tour, most of the players and the officials, they know we're doing the best we can do, and we're very accurate at what we do. So I think they respect it.
Something I've spent a lot of time on golf courses, something I've noticed a lot, and I'm curious if you have too, is these non-degreed weather experts. Do you run into a lot of people that think they know about the weather?
How about the phone app?
Yeah.
That's what we run.
Says.
Yeah. Well, my app says it's got a storm at 2, So, yeah, I mean, we deal with that all the time. And then even, I travel all over the country and the world, really. So you'll go to some places and you tell what the weather's going to be, and some local guy saying, "Oh, our weather never comes from that direction." And I'm like, "Well, it is today." So yeah, you do get second guessed by people a lot, but the app is the worst thing, I think, because those change all day long.
Is there any insider information you can give us about being on the ground at the Masters?
I mean, it's a special place to be, and I will say this: they have a very good weather policy in place, as does the PGA Tour. The PGA Tour utilizes LED boards, and they get messaging out that way. Well, they have manual boards at the Masters, so they'll post a sign instead of running an LED video or whatever, So they like to suspend play an hour before any storms are going to arrive so they can get the patrons off the property, because it takes that long to get that many people off the property. But it's a different animal, but it's similar. Do you get to enjoy the events? Like, did you grab a pimento cheese sandwich while you were there, or is it all work? It's all work, but if it's a quiet day, then they actually have 2 meteorologists there. We take turns to walk around and watch a little bit of golf if the weather's nice, and of course hit the pro shop. Yeah, so it's long days. If we are expecting weather that day, we may have meetings at 5 a.m. before they even open gates at 7 a.m. So the days are really long, and they're demanding. They're really on top of things. So it's just different. I can't really describe it, but it's different.
Next up, we have golf professional Andrew Rice, who's going to help us all improve our golf game in any type of weather. Andrew Rice, welcome. Thank you so much. I interview a lot of scientists. I don't interview a lot of golf pros, but we're talking about the world of golf and the world of meteorology. And you have found a way to combine these two worlds by creating a formula. So I want to start by asking you a little bit about how this came to be. Were you discovering as you were out playing that the golf ball was moving differently in different types of weather?
Emily, for sure. It's and I'll say this for the record. You've interviewed a lot of scientists. I am in no way, shape, or form a scientist. I'm a lowly golf professional. I do work with a golf company called Ping, and I'm a consultant to the engineering department there. And so those really smart scientists have helped me a tremendous amount over the years in just get a better, to help golfers get a better understanding as to how the weather, the wind, the temperature is going to influence the shots they're about to play. And I always say to my students, it's an outdoor game. We need to know better how to interpret this wind, this temperature, this elevation, this humidity, and factor all of that into our planning of the shot.
Yeah, you guys are almost like pilots in the way that weather is impacting every aspect of the game. So let's break it down and talk about the different types of weather and how it impacts the ball. Starting with what the formula was about, which was temperature. So hot weather, yes. Cold weather, what's happening in different ways.
Okay, so let's do it this way. We'll go temperature, humidity, and then we'll go the big one, wind. Okay, temperature, quite a simple formula. Most golfers, and I'll say this, all too many, in particular male golfers, have an overly inflated number as to what they believe, how far they think they hit the golf ball. Okay, so let's just assume that ladies don't really play that game. They just want the real number, whereas guys are like, no, it's got to be a big number. But let's just assume we have accurate numbers, and most of those numbers are curated in the 70 to 80 degree range. Okay. And all of the information I'm going to share with you is very much what I term to be a rule of thumb, Emily. Okay. It's not going to be exactly perfect, but it really is good enough for the vast majority of golfers out there to make better informed decisions as to what club to hit and how to play a particular shot. So temperature, for every 10 degrees that we go above, let's call it 75. So if we're playing at 85, every club in your bag is going to carry 2 yards longer. Same goes for every 10 degrees down from 75, 2 yards less. So if you're playing golf at 45 degrees, which I'm sure there are many people playing at 45 degrees today, although I would prefer to be at home. But let's say we're playing at 45 degrees, that's 30 less. That's 3 times 2, which is each club is going to be 6 yards shorter based on the temperature. And I know a lot of golfers have asked me, Andrew, does it help to keep my golf balls inside and to warm them up before I go out there and keep them in my pocket? Really, by the time we introduce that ball to the atmosphere, that temperature changes very quickly. And so it may have a very subtle influence on one shot, but that ball sitting out in the fairway waiting for you to, hopefully in the fairway, waiting for you to arrive. And by the time you arrive, that ball is at ambient temperature.
Okay, so the different clubs, it's 2 yards no matter what?
2 yards. Yeah, which was quite surprising to me. It's 2 yards per 10 degrees for all your clubs. So your driver is going to go 2 yards shorter if you're playing at 65, and your pitching wedge is going to go 2 yards shorter if you're playing at 65.
All right, so that's not really that. I mean, 2 yards is not really that big of a difference.
It's
You
not
can't blame the weather, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, true. Yes, you can't blame the temperature. You cannot blame the temperature.
Now, humidity. What about humidity? Because that's harder to measure.
It's harder to measure, and it has far less effect. This is just kind of a fun little one. It's not something that people need to grab their pen and start writing information down. But I know that many of us, we like to watch baseball in the summer, and we hear the commentators, oh, it's a hot, humid night at the ballpark tonight. The ball's not flying. Well, here's the interesting fact. The particles that go into making up humid air are less dense than the particles that go into making up regular, everyday air. And the golf ball will actually travel marginally further in humid conditions than non-humid conditions. And judging by the look on your face, you knew that already, but I would expect nothing less, Emily.
Yeah, well, I knew that, of course, but it's hard for, I think, people to grasp because humid air does feel so thick and so heavy. So it's hard to imagine that it is less dense, but you're absolutely right. All right. So did you have to do a lot of testing to find out this information? How was the process done? Did you put on your white lab coat and step into a lab?
Pretty much I'm the guy who gets curious about something like that. And then I go, okay, I know some smart people who have access to all these models, all these algorithms. Most notably, my friends over at Ping, the engineers, the scientists there. And I say, guys, what's the deal there? Is it possible for this to happen? They're like, yeah, funny you should ask. We have that. We've done that research project, and they've got so much data going back 50, 60 years that they've tested. Anything you can pretty much think of, they have tested. And so it really is tremendous for me as a golf coach to be A, curious about this stuff, but B, to have somebody who can help me with my understanding.
So they didn't have to go out and create conditions or just wait for a bad weather day. This is all information they already had.
They have tracked so many millions of shots, and they record the weather, they record the temperature, they record the wind direction. And so they can run it through their model and go, oh, if the humidity is up this amount, for example, I think the number they gave to me was a 250-yard driver on a humid day will go 1.2 yards further. Kind of a cool discussion topic more than anything else. Not going to move anybody's needle.
Right, exactly. Okay, so the one that we keep coming back to that you keep kind of hinting at is wind. So obviously, we talk about really windy golf courses and how just somebody's game is going to change completely. Can you tell me how it's changed? What have you learned in that aspect?
And Emily, I'll say this. This is something that has piqued my interest for a number of years now. And you mentioned a formula at the start. Yeah, there's a very simple formula for temperature. 10 degrees up, 2 yards per club, 10 degrees down, 2 yards per club. For wind, I would say I'm currently on my 5th formula. As I try to whittle it down, and I try to make each one better than the last. And I've worked with one of the engineers at Ping in particular quite a lot on this one. He's done most of the heavy lifting. But let's talk headwinds and let's talk tailwinds, okay? And let's also understand that you know this and I know this. A wind is almost never constant. It's ever changing. And that refers to the velocity of the wind, and the point that it's coming from is always varying. And that variation, let's just keep in mind as golfers, that variation can increase your dispersion by up to 30%. And so you'll have a 30% greater area that you'll hit regular shots in just because of those slight variations in the wind, okay? But we cannot really account for those variations. And so we're going to say, let's talk headwinds to start with. And we're going to go, I like for golfers to think in terms of 5, 10, 15, or 20. If it's more than 20, stay home. Okay, stay home. Don't play. Don't play. My experience is also this, and I've never had a meteorologist come to one of my golf schools, but I would love that. But airline pilots do a good job in gauging the velocity of the wind. Everybody else is 99% of the time higher than the actual wind. Okay, so I have a wind meter that I use, and that's kind of taught me and helped me to understand, this wind right here is about 7 miles an hour. But let's just think very basically, 5, 10, 15, or 20. If you've got that mph of wind blowing directly in your face, regardless of the club you're hitting, that is going to be the yards difference that your ball will travel. So you've got an 8-iron into a 20 mph wind straight at you. Add 20 yards. It's going to play 20 yards longer than it would typically play. If you've got a 5 mph wind blowing in your face and you're hitting a driver, your ball is going to go 5 yards less than before.
Okay. Well, that's easy to remember. Does the opposite work if you've got a tailwind?
No. And that's why we're going to talk. And no, it doesn't work opposite. That would be nice and neat, and we could package that up and sell it.
Yeah.
But I think first thing I want is for golfers to understand 5, 10, 15, or 20. That's the yards. Whatever club you're using is going to play longer into those headwinds. Flip it around. Tailwinds. Wind is helping us now. And a lot of golfers think, well, if I took 2 extra clubs going into the wind, I'll take 2 less clubs going downwind. And that is not necessarily the case. We've got a little divider that happens here. 5 mph downwind is going to help your golf ball travel 5 yards longer. Okay? 10, 15, and 20, it's about half of that. So 10 mph tailwind, it would help you about 5 yards. 20 mph tailwind would help you about 10 yards. And I'm referring to a typical golfer on a 70 to 75 degree day at sea level, carry numbers. We've got to put all those kind of qualifying statements in there. But I think it's a good thing to understand. So anyone listening in, headwinds, 5, 10, 15, or 20. That is the yards that the wind is going to influence the shot you're about to play regardless of the club. Tailwinds, 5 yards, 5 mph, tailwind, 5 yards of help. 10, 15, and 20 is half of that number.
Are your Ping engineers looking into why this is, or does nobody care? They're just going with it.
Here's why. Think of it this way. You've got 100-mile-an-hour wind coming in your face, okay? And you've got a plane taking off at 100 miles an hour. There's 200 miles an hour of force, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Plane is taking off at 100 miles an hour with that 100-mile-an-hour downwind. There's 0 miles an hour of force. That plane it would never take off in that direction, but it's taking off with zero force. Okay. And so when the ball, which has velocity, is traveling downwind, let's say a 20 mile an hour wind at 100 mile an hour ball speed, there's only 80 mph of force acting on that ball. But if we go into the wind, 20 miles, there's 120. Can you see how it's not even? Okay, there's a lot more force acting on the golf ball in a headwind than there is when that ball takes off on a tailwind. And so the effect, the help that we get from a tailwind is typically less than the hurt we would experience going into it. My statement is this, and this is still true. Golfers will typically underestimate the effect of a headwind whilst overestimating the effect of a tailwind. And I think if all golfers, if you just want to keep it super simple and come away with something from this discussion, be it that.
Okay. So do you, you said you're traveling around, you're playing with like a handheld anemometer. Is that the case?
Yes, correct.
And you're checking direction and speed. Do you recommend that?
If someone really wants to geek out, if I was coaching someone who wanted to play for a living, a young professional, got to get one. In my opinion, Emily, I think there's been such great information put out by people pertaining to green reading. Yet, if you look at the statistics, when a player putts a golf ball from 15 feet or longer, they rarely make the putt. Golfers would actually benefit, and I think they would avoid greater catastrophe by being able to read and interpret the wind versus read and interpret the green. I think it would be more stroke saving to them to know the wind than the green.
Any other variables? What about like moisture of the greens or elevation? What kind of role are they playing?
Elevation, and I was thinking about that. You know, we've got elevation that is not something that's in your purvey, which is kind of like atmosphere, right? You know, elevation is elevation. And my experience is this: certainly as we get higher, as we play golf at higher elevations, the ball goes further. But it's not going to be the same amount for everybody. It all depends on how you strike your golf ball, how much spin, what elevation you hit your golf ball at. For example, if I'm fitting somebody and they play golf in Denver, I need to make sure that with their driver, they have in the range of a 3,000 RPM spin rate when they hit their golf ball. That would be optimal at Denver altitude. At sea level, that same golfer might need a spin rate of 2,300 because when that air is so thin, that the revolution of the golf ball is something that creates that little lift, that little tail behind the golf ball that helps keep the ball aloft. And so it needs more spin at higher altitudes. So low spin golfers wouldn't experience as much gain playing at altitude as high spin golfers would.
It reminds me a little bit of like Moneyball, where it's like a game of statistics.
That's exactly it. It's, you know, and part of my job, what I strive to do is come up with like a simple formula that applies to as many people as possible and is easy to remember.
All right, but in all this formula and all this preparation, it kind of feels like anybody can be a good golfer. Is there still something though about the game and like just walking onto a golf course that you know nothing about and not really knowing the weather conditions and just going for it, that kind of unexpected, like this could be a terrible day or it could be an amazing day and I don't know?
I think that's the mystical nature of golf, Emily, is we never really know, you know, and it can be a negative on one hand, but I view my job as a golf coach and a golf instructor. I want to share hope. I want golfers to feel like when they wake up and they step onto that golf course, today could be the day. And if I can help equip them with just a little bit better information and help them to be able to handle, whoa, it's a really windy day. Well, I know my stuff. Then they can deal with those kind of challenges better.
One more question. If you were to pick your perfect weather day for playing, what would your perfect weather conditions be?
Oh, perfect weather would be, I'm going to go with sea level, low humidity, 78 degrees, not a breath of wind. no clouds, no wind. Just let's make it easy.
I was going to say, are you going for comfort or are you going for a good game?
Oh, I'm looking for ease. I'm looking for ease. I think every golfer would take that. It's a hard game. It's a challenging game. We don't want it to be too easy, but if the weather can help us out and make it a little easier, fantastic.
Off the Radar is a production of the National Weather Desk. Make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes publish every Tuesday. If you know someone interested in golf, please share this episode with them. We'd also love you to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Let us know what you think of the show and give me some ideas for future episodes. A big thanks to Andrew Rice, Stuart Williams, and of course, my husband Troy Miller for being on the show today. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie. Make it a great day.